Texans fans, be prepared for what could be fireworks this offseason. The Texans are in the mix for big-name wide receivers this free agency. Nick Caserio is making a big move, and what we thought could never happen with getting a big-name wide receiver is now a reality. So welcome to Texans Digest, everyone. Please hit that sub button. We're posting Texans news all season long, but we lost to the Chiefs. It's a heartbreaker. The season is over, but it's only fitting to talk about the offseason and what the Texans can do to get back to the playoffs and make a Super Bowl appearance or Super Bowl run. Maybe win our Super Bowl. We deserve it. But T. Higgins could be a Houston Texan, and it's all because of Joe Mixon. Joe Mixon is recruiting T. Higgins. Obviously, they played together. Higgins would come back. If he comes to Houston, could reunite his former teammates. So Mixon talked about Nick Caserio, and he said, I know for a fact Nick has something cooked up for, and fireworks will be here real soon. So even if it's not T. Higgins and it's like Garrett Wilson or trading for George Pickens, it looks like the Texans are going to make a massive move, a massive splash to go get a wide receiver. Because you look at the fact that Stephon Diggs is now going to be 32 this season. He has a torn ACL. You got to pay him probably $15-20 million a year because of the wide receiver market. And why not go get a younger guy who needs to prove himself? And Higgins can very well be a wide receiver one on any other team. Mixon is probably telling Higgins, look, you don't want to live in Jamar Chase's shadow the rest of your career. Why not go out and make a name for yourself with a great quarterback in C.J. Stroud? So Mixon can very well make a case and convince Higgins to go to Houston. And we've seen things in the past with T. Higgins saying, hey, I want to get paid. And last year when he was franchise tagged, he was not happy. And it was inevitable that he probably will leave Cincinnati after this season. He since obviously played on the franchise tag, and now it's looking more like he'll sign with Cincinnati. And they definitely have the money to bring him back, but they haven't necessarily done that with players in the past. So Higgins plays on the contract extension. He in the offseason, you have other problems to where he's like, dude, I want to get paid. I want to be the wide receiver one. And it's kind of crazy, but when you look at the fact that the Bengals have not really been the best re-signing wide receivers, they have not re-signed guys, right? They let Jesse Bates walk. He's one of the best safeties in the league. Could have paid him. Let Von Bell go. Wilson and Pratt took pay cuts. Mixon took a pay cut. So there is money to sign T. Higgins, but the history says, hey, let's just let our guys walk. So there could be like a T. Higgins thing where it's like, we have Jermaine Burton, or I feel like obviously it's stupid to say that they're going to move on from T. Higgins, but it's definitely a possibility that they could lowball him and say, hey, take $25 million a year. That's all we got. And the Texans could come and say, hey, we're going to give you $35 a year. And Higgins like, sign me up. So it's a matter of what you decide to do and what you decide to give a player. But Jefferson's making $35 million a year. Obviously, as a wide receiver, you want to make the most money in the league. That's the goal with any player. And we saw guys like Brandon Ayuk get paid $30 million a year. The wide receiver market is busted, but I don't really care if you can go out and get T. Higgins. Now, I did see something on X, and it kind of opens my mind to the fact that we don't have a lot of cap space to work with this offseason. But if you have a couple players, take some pay cuts, trade Laremy Tunsil, trade Titus Howard, and just redo the entire offensive line, you could have something rolling. Tunsil, I really do think that's not a bad idea to trade him because he's had so many penalties this year, plus cutting Shaq Mason. He's a veteran. He's kind of been injured this year. Titus Howard's the only one to where I feel like he can play tackle, he can play guard, but there's so much money invested in the offensive line, and it really wasn't anything special this year. Kenyon Green, 15th overall pick, did not live up to the hype. And there's just a lot of money to go around for the Texans to make other crazier, smarter signings, to be honest. Diggs, you could bring him back as a veteran contract, but only for the right price. I'm not paying Stephon Diggs $15-20 million a year for how the wide receiver market looks, and he's 32 coming off an ACL tear this upcoming season. So there's definitely a lot to look forward to for the Texans, but it looks to be Joe Mixon is recruiting everyone, and the biggest thing is that, honestly, let's take a look at it. T. Higgins' stats. Higgins has had a monster career with the Bengals, but imagine what he would be as the number one option on the Texans. So that could be something crazy to look for. Yes, he did not crack 1,000 yards, but he only played in 12 games, and he was banged up a little bit, but I don't think that takes any value away from what this guy has accomplished in his career. He's had 2 straight 1,000-yard seasons in 21 and 22, 6-7 touchdowns almost every year. He's been very consistent. But you have to also take into account that, remember, this is a guy who is living in Jamar Chase's shadow. If Mixon can kind of bring that to his attention and say, hey, you deserve a better chance. You deserve to go to Houston, and you deserve the world. Like, I could just so see Joe Mixon being that icebreaker, be like, all right, T, we played before. We've been on the same team. We've been to a Super Bowl. Look at what the Texans have accomplished this season. Look at what the Bengals have to do to that defense to kind of make you guys Super Bowl contenders. This is a big deal because there's so many things that can play into account. The Bengals have to play with a lot of their money because they have to extend Trey Hendrickson. They have Jamar Chase wants a contract. Joe Burrow probably have to take a pay cut. There's so many guys that they need to pay. Gesicki's contract is up. He might ask for $8 million a year. There's a lot of things the Bengals have to do on offense to re-sign guys, but also have to understand that the defense was terrible last year. So if they play their cards poorly and the Texans offer T. Higgins a massive contract, I don't even care if they give him $40 million a year if they can afford it. Go get T. Higgins. Because I don't honestly care if you have no offensive line. If you have T. Higgins, Nico Collins, Tank Dell, who was injured, I know, but he could come back. You have John Mechie in the slot, who honestly wasn't even that bad. And then if you could get Stephon Diggs on a short-term contract, I mean, this team might just win it all. And I know that this team was hyped up so much for their offense at the beginning of this season, and then they kind of had a piss-poor season and came up short and had a sophomore slump. But a lot of that has to do with you can't play like C.J. Stroud's rookie year every single year. It's hard to outperform those expectations. And just looking at the situation, it's very possible that from the past situations that T. Higgins has had and the encounters that he's had with Cincinnati, it doesn't look like they're going to pay him a lot of money. Now, the question is, does T. Higgins want to take a pay cut in terms of like 30, 28, and I think that's a pay cut for T. Higgins because he can very well explore the market with these other teams. The Patriots might just give him a lot more money, like $50 million a year. And this is the problem with the wide receiver. Well, 50 sounds kind of crazy, but this is the problem with the wide receiver market. So it's where like you give all these guys that much money, and it's like, what am I even doing at that point? So it's tough to look at because the wide receiver market right now, 35 a year for Jefferson. I don't think he's going to make that much money, but there's a very good chance 32, 31 for T. Higgins. But for teams that need a number one wide receiver, it's almost like for teams that need a quarterback, like Kirk Cousins to the Falcons, you are going to pay top dollar for that guy because you want him on your team. It doesn't matter that he's not the caliber player for the money that he is. It's that, hey, we need a wide receiver. We need T. Higgins. He's the best wide receiver on the market. And that could be. And even if it's not T. Higgins, even if Joe Mixon is hyping, and this is all conspiracy, but Joe Mixon talking about how Nick Caserio is making moves, it's almost inevitable that it could be Higgins to Houston. And I would lose my mind if that's the case. However, I wouldn't hate a George Pickens or a Garrett Wilson or a player that's just as good to be a number 2 wide receiver. So there's a lot of things the Texans can do. It all starts with getting cap space because you have Daniil Hunter on a big contract. Titus Howard's on a big contract. Laremy Tunsil's on a big contract. Nico Collins got paid. He might be able to take a pay cut. We'll see what we can do with the money. But it's like, at this point, I don't know if the Texans have that cap space if they don't want to make some moves. And that's why I say fireworks, because this could be the end-all, be-all with the Texans and their offensive line. They could just simply say, hey, we're moving on from players. You take a pay cut. You take a pay cut. And if it all works out, T. Higgins, welcome aboard. But there's still so many things that have to play into effect in order to go get a guy like Higgins. And looking at all the possibilities and what has happened last year, there's definitely a very good possibility. Mixon could make the argument, hey, Houston's your home. So that's all I got for you guys. It's a big rumor. It's a big risk. But when you look at it, T. Higgins could be a member of the Houston Texans, and it is shaping up to be a crazy offseason. Because once I heard the news that Nick Caserio is going to, and we'll go back to the clip of Mixon really quickly. So Mixon saying there's fireworks. They're going to be here real soon. It's really a matter of who do you go get? Who do you love at wide receiver? And a matter of getting cap space because the offensive line it was bad. So, I mean, might as well just move on from everyone, try and revamp. And the problem is you're not going to get all the cap space in the world for all your players, and it's gonna be a nitpicky type of situation. But if I believe in anyone, it's Nick Caserio, the guy who's drafted C.J. Stroud and then traded 10 spots up to draft Will Anderson, who's been unbelievable. And this team is very well shaping into effect. And to get a wide receiver in general, whether it's T. Higgins, Garrett Wilson, like any of the guys that I said, that would be crazy. So thank you everyone so much for watching. T. Higgins to Houston? Let me know your thoughts. But this is going to be a crazy situation to where it's honestly not that far-fetched to talk about. We're going to talk about it all season long. So hit that sub button if you're new. But again, appreciate everyone hanging out. Thank you for watching. And we'll catch you in the next video.